Welcome to another episode of Bargman Saturdays. And this week I decided to switch things up just a little bit by, using the microphone on my headset rather than the microphone on my webcam. I fear this way we get some slightly better audio quality, but if people prefer, I can just go back to using the webcam alone. It's not a big deal to me. I just figure, this way might be slightly better. With that being said, I suppose we should talk about the movie itself. And I'll be upfront admitting I know absolutely nothing about Doctor Strange before I went to this movie. I have not read any of the comics about the Sorcerer Supreme. I haven't, watched the Marvel live-action movie about the Sorcerer Supreme. In fact, the only other thing I've seen the Sorcerer Supreme pop up in is a few fanfics where people are doing crossovers between like Harry Potter and Marvel where he got mentioned. And I usually don't take those that seriously and don't read them. So yeah, I've stumbled across them, a few times and just like, I'm losing interest and don't really dig too much in the Sorcerer Supreme as a character. So I've gone into this film, largely blind. So yeah, I can't tell you how accurate this film is to the comics origin story for the Sorcerer Supreme. If people really care about, the story being a very accurate retelling. As a superhero movie, I'd say this one's so-so, I guess. I mean, we got some questionable animation at some points, with the cars at one point, but I'm not going to worry too much about animation quality, usually. I mean, it has to be pretty bad for me to really feel like it's worth commenting on. So, I suppose we should move on to why I think this movie is only so-so as a superhero movie, and that's because we don't spend a lot of time on Dormammu. He pops up early on in the film. We see Doctor Strange get pulled into this one girl's nightmare, and he sees Dormammu's demonic face, with it on fire and just floating in the background. And then after that, we see Dormammu coming up in the rearview mirror of Doctor Strange's car, and before he has his accident. And then Dormammu basically just disappears in the background for 50 some odd minutes or so, and we don't hear anything about him really for the most part. I mean, he gets partially mentioned every now and again, but he's not really got a presence, like Ganon or something in Ocarina of Time. He's just constantly dominating your thoughts or popping up, in a very meaningful sense. I mean, usually you get more presence from Dormammu's minions, but, it takes them all for them to even establish that those are his minions of darkness, almost 50 minutes into the film. I think they give you a good inclination of that. And that's around the same time we learned that Doctor Strange has this super rare magical ability that allows him to absorb his enemy's magical powers and then throw them back at him. Sort of like Genkai's Spirit Reflection Blast from Yu Yu Hakusho. And I think establishing that early on like they did was problematic. Because it means we already know how Doctor Strange is going to win the fight with Dormammu. He's just going to absorb his magical power. After all, Dormammu, as they established in the film, is just pure magical energy, which means Doctor Strange can just suck his entire essence into himself and just kill him that way. Which is what he does. It makes for a rather anticlimactic fight when you already know how it's going to end. It's a lot like watching Future Trunks fight Imperfect Cell in the future. You already know how it's going to go down. There's no doubt in your mind that, Future Trunks is going to win because he now has more enough power, speed, and experience and knows how Cell fights. He just has so many overwhelming advantages, there's no way he can lose. So it makes for a rather, boring fight when you think about it, though at least Future Trunks, sticks to the usual strategy, just getting the job done fast, so at least it doesn't linger too long. And I suppose you could say the same thing about this fight, but, for a final boss fight in your film, it's just not very suspenseful or interesting, in my opinion. Where I think the film, helps itself is it does do a bit better as a character study, because we get to watch, Doctor Strange go from, a a-hole doctor that doesn't really care about anybody unless it's going to make him famous, like with this scene.
Would a medical journal be interested in Miss Latanzi?
No, but...
Then neither am I.
To, a poor bum that's, been trying to spend all his money in order to fix his hands after his accident, because he can't be a neurosurgeon if his hands are broken, to, finding out about how his sister died and all that stuff, on his journey to, become a master of the mystical arts. So it feels like they put a lot more time and effort into, fleshing out Doctor Strange as a character, and so we can see his journey into becoming, the Sorcerer Supreme that he'd become. which is important in my opinion. If you're doing an origin story movie, it's one of the things that really bugged me with Batman Superman Apocalypse last time, because we don't really spend that much time with Kara. Yet the film's obviously meant to be an origin story for Supergirl, and she's not really getting a lot of key moments shown for her growth. That's not the case with this film, so for a character study piece, it does a lot better. Unfortunately, like I said, the action bits are a bit weaker, especially with the final fight. Some of the earlier fights, though, with the Ancient One's apprentices or students or whatnot, are better, but they don't involve Doctor Strange as Doctor Strange, so we're not as interested in them. I mean, don't get me wrong, they're okay to look at, but we don't have as much tension into them because you're like, I don't really know who Mordo or Wong are, and I don't really care for the most part. It's not until we get near the end of the film we realize that Wong's going to become basically Doctor Strange's like butler or something that we start to get any real investment in him, and that's like the very end of the film, like the last couple minutes they show that. And Mordo, it's pretty obvious just based on his name that it's like Morden, like the son of King Arthur, so you already knew he was going to turn evil, so it's hard to really care about how he fights, because he's going to have to fight Doctor Strange at some point because of his name alone. It's sort of like having a character named Sinestro, okay? It's sort of just obvious they're evil. So yeah, all in all, it's an alright film. I mean, the fights are not as good as I'd like, especially for the final fight, but I think it does a lot better, in developing Doctor Strange as a character, which is really important for the film. So all in all, I'd say it's worth checking out, but don't expect, really great fights in my opinion, involving magical abilities, unfortunately. It's always, wondrous when you can watch wizards, facing off against each other and they're throwing out all kinds of crazy powers and abilities, but we don't really get the true insanity I'd like to see in this one. Maybe on the live action film's better. That might be worth looking into someday, but not tonight. Until next time, then. See ya.
You wield the power of a god? Then give it to me! All of it!
No, it's not